universal wholeness is in us in a very true sense of the term because everyone is truly born of God. If this is true, then we are primarily and fundamentally perfect, no matter what we have done to ourselves or what others have done to us. Look at the screen and speak this affirmation with me with lots of power.
In the midst of the fireworks of life, I intend that I am free in the cool grace of spirit to be a calming presence.
And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Marcy. So the theme this month is inspired by the summer heat. Because the summer heat and the way we either react or respond to it is a wonderful metaphor for how we either react or respond when things heat up in our lives. And you know what I'm talking about. Yes? Okay. So today, actually each week, we've been talking about ways to keep our spiritual cool when the heat is on. And so each week, we have been looking at the various ways to approach when things get heated up. But today, I'm really on to this topic today. Today is entitled "Time to Simmer Down," and so it's a great opportunity to look at this thing called anger from a spiritual perspective. And what is anger really about? We're going to look at that. Is it ever productive? And what can you do with yours? And meanwhile, we're having a hard time just staying serious right now, aren't we? Oh my gosh. So the thing is about, this thing called anger, I know we've all read a lot. There's a lot online about it. There are all different theories and perspectives. I'm going to offer a perspective, and so I'm just saying this up front. Take what works for you, and if there are other things that you think work better for you, that's fine. But here's just something that I'm offering you today, this particular perspective on anger. I'm going to begin, first of all, with a review from last week. And last week, we talked about the shadow self from maybe a different perspective than most people had heard before. This idea that we live with one foot in divine reality and one foot in human experience. In divine reality, oneness, light, there's no shadow, there's just the light. And then in the human experience, there's an experience of duality, and in that a shadow gets formed. So let me just give you a little bit of background for those of you who haven't been here, and maybe just a review for the rest of us about how it is theorized that the shadow is formed. And the shadow, by the way, was a coin termed by Carl Jung, a great spiritual, I'd call him a spiritual psychologist because he was one of the few back in that time who saw the connection between spirit and the use of the mind or the thought processes. So shadow. He said shadow is the denied or repressed aspects of ourselves. And Robert Bly wrote a beautiful little book called A Little Book on the Human Shadow. And in that, he explained that we are born into this life as infants with a 360-degree personality. So when I thought about that, I thought, oh, circle. Circle stands for unity, wholeness, right? So the circle, the 360-degree circle, children come in with the full range of emotion, and of course, they're learning how to use it to achieve, some whatever they need to be sure that they thrive. And what happens though is with certain emotions that are not acceptable to their loved ones around them, let's say they're ridiculed for trying to get attention, or they are punished for being angry, or they are um, told that they're not supposed to cry, that crying is not a good thing, whatever it might be. And some of you may have experienced this yourself in your childhood. But what happens is, and this is how Robert Bly explains it, we take that slice of the pie of our 360-degree full pie, and we throw it into a sack over our back that we drag around then for the rest of our lives. So those are all of the denied aspects of ourselves. And what happens, the consequence of that, is we end up either projecting it onto other people. We get furious that other people are like that, and or we take it in on ourselves and go into depression. Um, we recognize it in ourselves to an extreme degree, leaving out all of the positive aspects of ourselves. So it can be misused, is the whole point. So the more that we're able to bring the light or our awareness to the shadow self and integrate it into our being, the more we're able then to thrive and to it actually, by embracing our shadow, we're able to shine our light more fully. And we're able to use those things called anger and so on and so forth in a more powerful and positive way. Does this sound good so far? All right. So let's take a look at the what is anger really about. And I have a beautiful little parable that's told by Greg Bear in his book called Real Love. And he said he tells this parable. He said, imagine that you are very, 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 very hungry. And you have $5 left, and you put it on the kitchen counter, and you go into the bedroom to put your shoes on, and you come back, and somebody has snuck in, taken the $5, and taken off. And that was your last $5. So how do you feel? Angry, probably really angry, furious. You go out looking for the person. Where are they? Really angry. Okay, let's do a second version of that story. Let's say you have $5 on the counter. You're going to go to the store and pick up some food. Go in and again, you go into the bedroom to put your shoes on. You come back, the $5 gone. But this time, you have $5 million in the bank. Now, how do you feel? Not so angry. And actually, this is really a story to illustrate this concept of unconditional love. Believe it or not, it's not about money. That's not the reason why he told it. What he wanted to do is he wanted to share what happens when we feel a deficit of unconditional love in our lives. When we feel a deficit, anger is the result, a feeling of helplessness and powerlessness and fear, a fear that I won't get my needs met. So, with that in mind, we're going to look at the definition of fear that Greg Bear has, which I think is really pretty right on. I really like this. He said that we need to remember that our anger is actually a reaction to the feelings of helplessness and fear that result from a lifetime of struggling to survive without unconditional love. Unconditional love. Well, let's talk about what that looks like, because I always like to have a real practical example of that. And so this is a story told in Chicken Soup of the Soul by Jack Canfield. He had a friend of his who came and told him this story. It's a story about a famous research scientist, and I did some research to find out who the scientist was, and I didn't come up with any particular names, but Jack Canfield. So we'll look to Jack Canfield. He's the one who told the story. A famous research scientist who made several important medical breakthroughs was being interviewed by a newspaper reporter. And the newspaper reporter wanted to know, what is it about you, that makes you so different from the average person to the point where you have just had these amazing medical breakthroughs? What do you attribute that to? And so the scientist said, well, it goes back to when I was age 2 and a lesson that I learned from my mother. You see, I had gone into the kitchen, age 2 if you can imagine, opened the refrigerator door, took out a, a carton of milk, okay, and his hand slipped and the milk spilled all over the kitchen floor. And so his mother, upon discovery, comes out and takes a look at it and says, wow, you have made a wonderful mess. A wonderful mess. So, it's already done. So how about if you take a few minutes and play in it? And we'll talk about it in a few minutes. So the little child gets down, I guess the mother gets down, they both play in the milk together. And she said, well, whatever when we make a mess like this, it's important that we clean it up. So what's your choice? Do you want to use a towel, a mop, or a sponge? And so, he chose whatever he chose, and they both cleaned it up together. And then she said, so here we have what's called a failed experiment. A failed experiment. So how about if we take the container out into the backyard, we'll pour water into it, and then we'll practice how you can hold it with your 2-year-old hands and body, how you can take it out without spilling it. Wow. That sounds like somebody who's had family education center, right, Mary? That's the parenting and Linda that we studied when we were younger with our children. So unconditional love, that calmness that mother brought to it, and a problem-solving attitude. So the idea was that mistakes are for learning; they're not for punishment. It's, what can we learn from this? Powerful, yes? So unconditional love, that's what unconditional love looks like. So, as a child, you can, if you want to, you can blame your parents for your anger. But as we move into adulthood, and actually even our later teen years, it's our responsibility to transmute and transform that anger into something useful. Ernest Holmes says, and the useful thing obviously is love. Ernest Holmes says, without love, nothing can be accomplished. With love, all things are possible. When we love, our prayers are answered, and the gift of heaven is made. What is the gift of heaven? Love, peace, joy, more life, more liveliness, more vibrancy. And he says, we enter into this paradise through the gateway of love. Love toward one another and love toward God, the all that is. Love is greater than all else and covers a multitude of mistakes. Love overcomes everything and neutralizes all that is unlike itself. Love is God. God is love. Love is God. It's that energy of love. When you feel that, you know that that's the presence of God that you're feeling. And because we're human, there will be times when we feel angry. So let's take a look at the next question, which is anger ever productive? And here's my answer. Yes and no. Yes, it's productive when it's used for the good, when we turn it into a passion and a forward movement to bring about greater good. Know when it's used to be destructive. So there's actually two stories that are told by the master teacher Jesus. He, how many remember the story about him getting angry with the money changers in the temple? Yeah. So that's one story. And in that story, he's actually using his anger to create positive change. But how about the time when he zaps a fig tree because it won't bear fruit? That may not be so productive. However, I think it has been used by people to explain what happens when our anger gets out of control, that it can be very destructive. So from that standpoint, maybe it is, it teaches an important lesson. But non-productive anger, I think, can be really seen. This is actually a study by AAA as something called road rage. Yes? This study really blew my mind. It said that 80% of all 80% of all adults within the past year have expressed some form of road rage. 80%. That's a lot. Oh my gosh. So, but tailgating, driving fast through when there's heavy traffic. You've seen the people who zip in and out, even though the traffic is really heavy. Um, uh, so it's that all the way down to people who actually ram their cars into somebody else, or who um, get out of their car and yell at somebody, or or shooting somebody. And usually the reasons are pretty trivial. They're things like you're playing your radio too loud, or you're driving too slowly. As I've gotten a little bit older, I'm now closer to the speed limit than I used to be. I used to drive a whole lot faster. And I wonder sometimes about the people behind me who maybe aren't there yet and get really impatient. But hey, I'm doing the speed limit, right? But road rage, and so the thing to look at then is, what is it that really set them off? We know that it wasn't what the other person was doing. That's from basic psychology. We know it's not the thing that happens. It's what we believe about what happens, right? It's not the thing that happens, it's what we believe about it. So what they found in their research is it had to do with a person's attitude or perspective and the level of stress in their lives. And I think again, if you look back at it, it points back to that person feeling a lack of God's love, a lack of the good of life that shows up as anger and frustration. Frustration being a form of anger. So instead of being angry then, the productive thing is to convert it and use it for good. Here's a great example. Let's say that you are noticing that people are shooting through a particular intersection near your home, and there happen to be a lot of children walking and on bikes in that area. And you're terrified that one of these children are going to be hurt. So you get out there and you rant and rave at people and yell at them and tell them to stop, and it's not working. That's just venting your anger. That is not long. I mean, it might help in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't help solve the problem. What helps solve the problem? You go to either your local police department or to DelDOT, whoever, and the highway department, and find out and put in petitions, whatever it takes. Work with them to make some changes, whether it's to put in a stoplight, or to put in some signage, or, like Dan said, speed bumps, or whatever is necessary in order to do something positive, do something proactive, something for good. So that's the difference. So whenever we find ourselves ranting and raving, the question to ask is, how can I use this anger for good? Say that with me. How can I use this anger for good? Ernest Holmes, and I'm just going to summarize what he said. He talks about using that creative energy of life itself that we have at our fingertips for something instead of against something. And I believe Mother Teresa said something very similar. And she was really big on when people came to her and said, "Do you want to come and do a demonstration against war?" And she said, "No, but when it's for peace, then I'll come." Do you see the difference? So using our creative energy, even our anger energy, for something good. That's a productive use of anger. So now what can you do with your anger? This is the last piece. And Ernest Holmes says, when our minds are filled with thoughts of anger, hatred, and resentment, we are pouring poisons into our body that harm the body tissues. But degenerative thoughts can be turned into creative, energizing, vitalizing ones. Anger can be turned into love. Destructive power can be turned into healing power. So how do we do that then? So we know that. We know that we can change it. How do we do that? Greg Bear offers a really beautiful example. He says, because many of us um, maybe were brought up with a deficit of unconditional love, we have some patterns that have been set in motion. So it's important for us to take care of ourselves and find someone that we can share the anger with that loves us, that can love us in the midst of our anger and our, whatever it is that we say, can hold us in a space of unconditional love. And here's the deal. It is not to be the person that you're angry with. So, my question to you is, can you think of a time when using anger against someone has made the relationship better? I mean, like letting your anger all out on them. Do you feel closer to the person? Do they feel closer to you? And the answer is no. So it's not that we want to suppress our anger, but we want to learn how to get ourselves cooled down or simmered down by talking with somebody who can help us get recentered and someone who we're not angry with in that particular moment. We have practitioners here who are trained in that. I'm trained in that. So there are people, and I'm sure you have friends that you can go to, who can also offer that same centering way of being. So that's the first one is get loved. That's Greg Bear's. Go find a way to get yourself back into a place of love with a loving person. The second one is to love the self and set personal boundaries, because if we don't take time and do what is called radical self-care, self-love, what happens is we get resentful. We start getting resentful of people pulling at us. And so it's really important to do that. I have been on a very powerful and strong practice of that myself for several months now. It really is powerful. And what I have learned from that, how to do this radical self-care, is it's a morning practice of journaling. And I've shared this with many of you before, where I journal from the place of my conditioned mind, my angry self, my frustrated self. And then I shift into my authentic self in the form of spiritual mind treatment. And you don't need to know spiritual mind treatment to learn how to shift into the authentic self. But the authentic self has the big broad picture, can look at it in a way that can help shift the energy back into love. And I found that to be very powerful. And I'm also working with a spiritual coach as well, who holds that space of love for me as I work through different things. So, no matter how far we are along the spiritual path, it's wonderful to have people that we can turn to support us and get us back on the path of self love. Several of my practices in self love. One is just making sure I take good care of my body, getting enough sleep, drinking plenty of water, eating the right foods, breathing regularly, just taking some deep breaths, exercise, that's all part of radical self care. But another thing that I have learned that I think is so powerful that I want to share with you is for years I've done a gratitude list pretty much each day. I've shifted that a little bit. I still do that as well, but what I'm doing now is a list of how I appreciate myself. I actually write down I appreciate myself for, because one of the things I've learned is we need to learn how to give ourselves love, give ourselves the love and appreciation that we wish somebody would do for us. And when we do that, we feel filled up. We feel filled up and overflowing. And then we don't care whether people appreciate us or not, because we feel full. So these are some things that are important. Now, the last one, though, I think is one of the most powerful ones on how to shift anger into love, and that is to turn to the divine. And there in different spiritual traditions, it's said different ways. It's about casting the anger onto the divine within and allowing that source of all that is, that all-knowing presence of God that knows how to shift and change energy, even when you don't, your human self doesn't. Because why? Because the presence of God is love. Love heals all, remember? Love and God are one and the same, and that presence and power and grace of God knows how to heal that anger permanently so that you can move on with your life. And now that we know that the damage that anger causes our own bodies, um, and anger and resentment and all of that, we know that as soon as possible, it's important to take action. The moment we notice we're angry, we want to feel the anger. We don't want to suppress it. So, however you need to let it out. For some people, it's go and the other night beat on a drum. We were beating on the drum, or go take a walk or run or whatever it is that's necessary for you to get the energy. Remember, anger is an energy. And then begin to get in a higher vibration so you can begin to see things from the perspective of your authentic self. Once you can do that, then you can use that anger or what it is that you don't like in the world and use it for something good. I mean, it's awesome that we can do that we are transmutators, that we can transmute energies that don't seem very useful into something productive, because each and one of us, are made in the likeness and image of God. And the God presence, when even we can't do it ourselves, when we cast it on the divine within, then the divine supports us in transmuting that and beginning to see things from a different perspective. I love that. I love that awareness. It's so empowering. So I just want to leave you with a beautiful reading from Charles Fillmore in Talks of Truth. He said, "The love of God must be felt in the heart. It cannot be described. The one who has not felt it can have no concept of it from the descriptions of others. But the more we talk about love, the stronger it grows in the consciousness. And if we persist in thinking loving thoughts and speaking loving words, we are sure to bring into our experience the feeling of that great love that is beyond description, the very love of God." So let's turn within. So as we turn within our hearts, I invite each and every one of us to bring that powerful intention for healing. We know that healing is the revealing of the presence of God in, through, and as our lives. So I begin by knowing that all there is God. All there is God. There is nothing but God. God is the only presence, power, and source of all that is. God is the creator, the creative medium, the law, and the creation itself. And we are made in the likeness and image of God. That means we are creator, creative medium, and creation in our own lives. We are the triune nature of God individualized. Each one of us, children of the Most High. And as Jesus said, ye are gods, children of the Most High. So we remember that, and we remember that the kingdom of heaven is within us, and that all that is necessary to transmute this thing called anger into love and to use it for good takes place within our very own hearts, within our very own beings. That shift of our heart, that shift into a higher vibration that allows us to be instruments of great and abundant good in our lives. I'm so grateful that we are now aware, awake to the powerful presence of God that is here for us, always supporting us, always ready for us to just simply ask so that we may receive. So I'm so grateful that each and every person in this room, no matter what emotional tone that you are carrying with you today, that emotional tone is up-leveled to a higher level, a higher expression of love, higher expression of peace, higher expression of joy, higher expression of the very grace of God. Each person in this room magnifying, glorifying the presence of God just by being who they are in truth. Each one of us now feeling motivated and excited about getting out there into the world and converting all of this energy that maybe hasn't been working for us into something really good. And I say, thank you, thank you, thank you for this realization. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the manifestation of this word, knowing that it does not come out void, but it goes into the universal law and comes back fulfilled. And so it is with great joy as I invite each and every person to affirm this truth by saying, yes, and so it is.
When I fall